Hi everybody, welcome to An Abundance of Books. My name is Julia and today we're doing the third edition of Recommendation Leapfrog. I will link the playlist down below, but the gist of it is I am about to recommend 6 different books in 6 different genres, each one leading into the next one, but all of the books don't have something in common. And I think for the first time all of these truly are recommendations. There are 4 or 5 stars, so hopefully you get something out of this. The first genre that we are starting with is historical, and for that I am recommending Kindred by Octavia Butler. This is classified as science fiction, but there's some debate around whether it should actually be science fiction or fantasy or historical. But when I read it, the sense that I got was that this was a story about history. And the fact that we time travel there is sort of not as significant. Kindred is the story of Dana, who is a woman living in the 1970s, who is magically transported back into the early 1800s and saves a young white boy from drowning, who turns out to be one of her ancestors who is a slave owner. It's a hard story to pin down. I did a whole ramble review on it because I can't get it out of my head, but it's a story about identity and family and the lengths that you are willing to go to, I guess. It's obviously also very much a story about slavery and race. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it, especially if you enjoyed this sci-fi, which I'm about to recommend, Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I do wonder in this if people just think I'm nuts when I recommend something right after the other, but just trust me, I'll justify it to you. Scythe is a story about a dystopian, utopian future. The waters get a bit muddy there. About a world where science has conquered death and no one dies, but to keep the population under control there is a council of scythes who are the only people who can kill. Or glean, I think is what they call them. And we're following in the first book 2 Scythe apprentices as they are assigned their mentors and learn all about the philosophy behind gleaning. And it's so fascinating, but I think the real parallels in here are really interesting and nuanced discussions about morality. No one here is portrayed as right or wrong. Everything is shades of gray in both Kindred and Scythe. And both of them sort of force you to reckon with what you would do if you were in these characters' situations. And both focus, Scythe particularly on death, but together they focus a lot on like pain and suffering, as well as characters being thrust into a scenario that they never thought that they'd find themselves in. The Scythe apprentices are chosen and they don't really have a choice about whether they get to do it or not. In fact, they argue the best Scythe is someone who doesn't want to be a Scythe, which is fun. And both sort of do also talk about themes of power, where scythes are sort of above the law and the slave masters. There's just so much great to talk about in here. These are both like really interesting, thought-provoking books, so I recommend both of them. But if you enjoyed Scythe, I would like to recommend this bad boy, Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and I didn't drop it. This is a fantasy book following Wallace Price, that's his name right, as he has recently died and is being taken by a Grim Reaper to this cottage, the ferryman's house, as he prepares to pass on to the other side. Right away you can see both stories deal a lot with death. That's basically the main theme in both of them. And they're handled very differently. This is much more, I don't want to say lighthearted because it's about death. It's not a fun read, but it is a much more hopeful feel, whereas Scythe is definitely more on the dystopian side. This is more whimsical is the word I want to use, I guess. It's both like a found family, but also a good mentor-mentee relationship. It's like a found family, but with parents, which I think is very fun. Normally found family is, when I think of it anyway, it's just like a bunch of kids, orphans usually, for whatever reason, who find each other, but this has a very strong like parental feeling in Scythe and this. Just a beautiful story that makes you question the meaning of life and the meaning of death, and it's great. This is one of my favorite books of all time, so you should read it if you can handle reading about death for 350 pages. So if you enjoyed Scythe, you might enjoy Near the Bone by Christina Henry. These feel different because they are. The vibes of these are very different, but they have a lot of common elements. You can see just from the cover, it's a lone house in an isolated area. Near the Bone is the story about, what is her name? Maddie? Maddie is her name. Who is living with her husband at the top of this mountain. It's just them, there's nobody else around. He is very abusive and she is grappling with that, but also there is something in the woods. There's some sort of creature out there. It opens, or pretty early on, she finds a fox that was like mangled but not eaten, which is very strange. Like her husband keeps saying it's a bear, but bears don't do that. It is a horror book and it's pretty gory, so if that's something that you don't enjoy. It's something I really enjoy though. Under the Whispering Door and Near the Bone share a feeling of isolation and also this weird sort of unstuck from time thing. They feel like they could be set anywhere and at any time, which I think is a really special quality. They both are also, in a weird way, survival stories. Near the Bone is definitely like surviving in the snow on a mountain, but they both feature, how do I say this, coming to terms with like why you want to survive, with like articulating what your reason to live is. And they both feature some intimidating fantastical creatures, let's put it that way, and also a theme of sort of dealing with outsiders. How does your tight-knit, isolated family deal with someone else coming into it? Trying to keep everything vague, but Near the Bone was on a bunch of people's best of 2021 lists, so don't trust me, trust everyone else. If you enjoyed Near the Bone, you might enjoy Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is a contemporary novel, I would say. It is translated from Swedish. It is about a Swedish small town where hockey is their #1 thing. High school hockey too. And the whole community kind of gathers around it. And I'm going to say something that is not in the synopsis. So if you already want to read Beartown, go ahead. It's so tricky because it's a spoiler, but also a content warning. So if you don't care, skip off, but 3, 2, 1, here it is. There is a girl who is sexually assaulted and the whole town kind of has a different reaction to it and the ripple effects of it throughout the entire town. Both of these books feature snowy settings and also the feeling of isolation. Beartown, it's definitely framed as like close-knit, but in a lot of aspects those are sort of the same thing. It again deals with the idea of new people, outsiders coming in, how do you deal with that? But there's also a big feministy sort of aspect to both of them, particularly in women having agency. Beartown is such a great book. I read it before my channel, but it's Fredrik Backman, so like, you know, it's amazing. I don't think I actually did it, but in my memory, I threw the book across the room at one point because I was so angry. But it was a library book and I'm not a monster, so I think that's a false memory. On to the 6th and final book, a non-fiction recommendation. If you enjoyed Beartown, you might enjoy She Said by, looking at my notes, Jodi, Kantor, and Meg Twohey. This book is following the reporters who broke the Weinstein case. They follow sort of their process of interviewing people and finally bringing the case to publication into the Me Too era, and it also covers a bit of the Ford Kavanaugh case. Hopefully the connection here should be obvious. Beartown is taking a fictional look at what happens when sexual assault rocks through a town, and She Said follows a real life example of it, and it's interesting to see how those two are similar, how they differ. She Said is also just one of the best written nonfictions that I ever read. It will make your blood boil, but in a good way. Both of them sort of also feature a discussion of power, as I guess is inherent in any sexual assault case, and also the concept of the golden boy. It's definitely not a fun read, but it is a worthwhile read if it's something that you're interested in. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you enjoyed this format. I just think it's a bit fun and different, and I don't do enough recommendation videos, so hopefully I'll get my act together and do more of them in the future, but this is what you get for now. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.